Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce my family, my wife, my daughter here, Angela, as I say, my wife, Bridget, and I'm Mr. George Carr, the half-brother of Joe Green, who was killed down in a Ferry Brig power station for his fight for believing in the Union, which is a great friend of Mr. Scargill, and believed in everything Mr. Scargill had done. And I'm in the same belief.
David died, and Joe Green died, and Terry Leaves, and Jimmy Jones, and all the rest of them died. And their only crime was fighting for their jobs. And if they leave one man in jail, or one man at the end of the pit lane, then David and Joe Green and all the rest of them will never rest, and they'll have died in vain. And I say this to the wives of them miners who were sacked, and the miners who were jailed, that is our fight now. Mine and Dorian, and it must be every miner's fight and every miner's wives support group fight to get them men out of jail and reinstated, and every one of them their jobs back.
Betsanger is the most militant pit in the whole of the British coalfield, I would say. And when you look at how many lads that we've got in prison, 7 of them, 5 years and 3 years, we got the worst of that. When you look who was sacked at them pits, the branch officials, all of them, very strong, good trade union men, but they're militant.
He worked 2 days, and on his second day the manager came, or personnel manager came, and gave him his notice. This was before he was at court, so he's been punished twice. He's already lost his job for life, plus he's in Durham.
I'm Mrs. Hughes, and I have a son, Kevin. He was jailed for 2 years for unlawful assembly at Dordon Pit. He's now serving youth custody, and he's never been in trouble before. That was his first offence with the law.
I'm Mrs. Christine Little. I've got 2 sons in jail, Brian and John. They're getting 2 years for unlawfully assembly. And I think my oldest son, Brian, is getting the sack from the Navy.
They've been in prison for 3 years, and their only crime was to fight for their jobs. They're being suppressed.
Well, it's just disgusting. We're going to stay here and fight for them to get out, because they shouldn't be in there. Like Hazel said, Terry got a year for the offence and 4 years for being a minor. Our husbands have got a year for the offence and 2 years for being a minor. It's just not fair. They're just political prisoners. We want them out now.
Well, I was disgusted in how long they got. At first it didn't sink in. I didn't realise what 30 months were until I got out of court, and realised it was 2.5 years.
It's bad enough for me, but just my husband being sacked. But it must be terrible for those families. Are the men in jail terrible?
I think they was just victimised because they were striking minors. I was absolutely shattered. I couldn't take it in that they'd got this long. We expected 9 months at the most. I do think that the judge just made an example of them.
The government are to blame from beginning to end as far as the minors serving prison sentences are concerned. Most of those men and boys serving prison sentences have never ever done a thing wrong in their lives, and now they hold police records, they hold criminal records, which will never be wiped out against them.
You're not going to tell me that Russell and Dean set out deliberately to murder anybody, because I don't believe you. Miners are very caring people, and that's why we're fighting so hard for our pits, our jobs in the communities. And I really feel sorry for them two lads, because in no way did they set out to hurt anybody at all. It was an accident. And I think that they've just made an example of them. You get a man, you know, who murders his wife, he drops her in a lake, in the Lake District, and what's he get? A suspended sentence. You get an accident here, and look what these two lads get like. It's sad, really.
That's what it's all about, victimisation. And the whole trade union movement's we've got to all go together because of men being victimised. The trade union movement can't sit back knowing that men have been victimised.
I live at Betsang myself at the village, and when the occupation took place, you know, some of the lads were in there, and apparently they didn't have some cups and, you know, a lot of food in there. They had some food, but not too much. So me living at the village, I went round to my house, got some sandwiches, a couple of flasks, some cups and that, took them in to the offices. I was in there a couple of hours or so. I popped in here and there with bits of food and that was it. A couple of weeks later, I was the same as the other lads. I had a letter through my door saying I was sacked through gross misconduct. But how they were taking food in gross misconduct, I don't know.
In this area, 72% of all branch officials, committee men and activists of the various strike centres have been dismissed. From crimes ranging from crossing over a white line, to being admonished in a court, to having no charges preferred against them whatsoever. The facilities that I enjoyed and my union enjoyed within this unit was established over many, many years. My union office is now occupied by kennels to house guard dogs that have never been known, you know, in the annals of British trade unionism within this colliery. And as you can see across here, my union office with a frosted glass window is now occupied by dogs and by an outside security firm.
Every one of them sacked miners and every one of them jailed miners, they politically sacked and politically jailed. And the TUC and the wider labour movement has got to call a general strike and to get them men out of jail and reinstated. All of them has to be reinstated and out of jail and given their jobs back.
How can you describe a man that's fighting for his trade union, that's fighting for his job, as a criminal? He's not a criminal. I think he's an honourable man. And I think it's disgusting that men have been arrested and dismissed for merely crossing a line. This has been proved. A chalk line on the road where a policeman has goaded young men into saying, you cross that line.
I think the government was the instigation of the violence on the picket lines for bringing the police in the first place. I mean, where in God's name have you seen riot shields apart from on the picket lines? I mean, them things only happen in like South Africa and Ireland. Now, the day these lads went back to work, There was a young lad there taking some photographs, and he remarked to a policeman standing there. He says he couldn't believe that he was at the colliery. He says he'd only seen things like that happening back where he lived in Belfast.
At one time it was known as Little Belfast because of the police violence here. And it really was like Little Belfast. There's been trouble on both sides, but the police they provoked the boys to tremendous lengths. And we personally have watched them do this.
I think in riots in Brampton, I think there were more army than what there were police. I believe that for tactics, it was too well organised. Everybody, they knew exactly what to do. They knew where they were going. It was just like watching war. Yeah. It was like watching something off at television.
We didn't have the police state till late in September. In September, because our lads never had to picket at home. They was at the beginning of the strike in Warwickshire, and when we came out of Warwickshire, they went to Colchester, Brighton, and into London, to the power stations. And we never experienced the police state. And when they were coming home and they were saying to us, "You wouldn't believe the kickings that we're getting." Now, me personally is saying to Terry, "Come on now, half and half." You know, and he said, "What you're seeing on that television is not half and half." He said, "We're made out to be criminals and thugs." But when we experienced it ourselves at our own pits, that is when these women were shocked. Because you couldn't move down this street. You couldn't walk about with your shopping bag. They wanted to know where you was going, what you was doing, who you was married to. And then came the other side of it, where they're busting in your house, arresting your men for crimes that they hadn't committed. And we really did experience it, and it was frightening.
Because we live in Notts, I mean, we had a lot of pickets that came down into neighbouring pits like Welbeck to picket. And I mean, I remember it vividly because I used to walk every day with my 4-month-old baby to Orsett and back. And I'll never forget seeing transit vans full of police, and I thought, well, where are they all coming from? And how can they do this? And next thing we had roadblocks against church, every junction, every road junction leading into our village, Welbeck, Orsett, everybody was stopped. Every car was stopped. I mean, anybody leaving up here for a gallon of petrol was stopped and turned back. If it were just a man on his own or 2 or 3 men in a car, they were stopped and turned back. And I just couldn't believe that this country could allow that sort of thing to happen.
When they came into that night at the party, and they came in for violence, they didn't come there to stop a noise or anything. They knew what they come there for.
Oh yeah, well,
because the strike committee, 2 of the strike committee members were in the house. That's who they were after.
Did they beat your husband up in the house?
No, they beat him up in the garden. Then they banged his head up and down the car. And then I didn't see what happened in the van, but there was people who were in the van said that he was really beaten up in the van and at the police station as well.
And he was in hospital 3 days, suspected broken neck. That's when the coppers got scared.
I've seen my husband coming home from that picket line with bruises right all over his body. My son was hit out cold by a policeman. And I'm supposed to have respect for them? Phew, no, not after this. I used to say at the beginning, oh, they can't all be bad. There's good and bad in everything. Right? But I found out that the police are all bad. They are all bad. And when they can boast to you on the picket line that they are having £80 a day, and they are having new carpets and new cars, new washing machines, and intimidating us like that, and we're expected to take that, no way. And that's all it's been from the day one of this strike with the police is intimidation right the way down the line.
He was 3 weeks up in Staffordshire, you know, unable to talk to one man going into work. And the pickets themselves was actually abused by the working miners going in on the buses, waving their pay packets at you and giving you, sticking 2 fingers up in the air, these sort of insults, you know. And it was just out of sheer frustration that because I couldn't get to talk to the actual people that was working, that the incident happened in which I was involved in it, you know, and then I was sacked.
All we were trying to do was to fight for our jobs in our pits. She created the army and she had it all worked out 3 years ago. She had that all worked out. She knew what she was doing. It was obvious that she wanted to break the union movement and the working class, so she set about breaking the miners' union first. And she had to get her police army to do it. And people have got to be made to really realise this is not a one-off. It'll happen to them as well.
It's been going on for the last 8 years, and I know this for a fact from a person. He lived near a place, an old disused place, and the police moved in 8 years ago, and they was training with riot gear. And when the local people used to go over and watch and ask questions, they was told it was nothing to do with them and they shouldn't be there. One man got through, an old man who is an ex-miner, and he asked what was going off and he said, "Are you expecting trouble?" He said, this is 8 years ago incidentally, he says, "If Scargill gets in, you bet we are." The 9 lads were standing in the dock, and he just looked at them and he said, "Take the back 4 out," which the back 4 went out. And he read the first 5 names out and he goes, 2 year, 2 year imprisonment, 2 year, 2 year, 2 year, to the first 5. And then he said, "Next, bring the next 4 back." Why, the next 4 come back. And I mean, everybody in the court thought, oh, he's going to go lenient on the next 4. But he didn't. He said, 2 year youth custody, 2 year youth custody, 2 year imprisonment, 2 year imprisonment. And that was it, and he just got up and walked away.
The evidence that came up in court, there was no way that they could have found them men guilty. It was just that the judge swayed it the other way.
Yeah, he must have done. Even the jury sitting there listening to what he listened to, and the coppers were all proved, you should have filmed it, they were all proved to be lying. Their notebooks, they were asked to get their notebooks out by judges. They says, no. They says, get them out, you're on oath now. And they were proven to be liars there. To sit and watch it was like something out that...
We watched it, didn't we?
Yeah, it was...
We watched it
stupid.
For a full week.
And then for a judge to turn around at the end of the bloody day and say, I've got to send you away to condemn them. You know what I mean? Even for a jury, they must have been handpicked. Don't care what anybody says.
But the judge, I mean, he'd listened to it all, and he actually swayed it.
When our sons were in court with their barristers, they were told that they had to plead guilty on one thing, that was unlawful assembly. Should they not do that, they were going to be put in remand until such times as that they would have to come up and plead guilty to that case, unlawful assembly. And that's where, you know, that's what they had to do.
I honestly cannot understand why the public cannot see for themselves what's happened. I mean, for months and months and months we had Mrs. Thatcher sitting there, oh, I want nothing to do with the strike, it has nothing to do with this government, it is between a company and their workers. And now, oh, I would never gloat, but she's sitting there, I'll see off the unions, I did this and I did that. Why does the public not realise? And that's only one instance, we're only involved with the miners, but people, I mean, we can see things where they've told lies in other cases. It's unreal, I think, the way they do things. I can't understand why the public cannot see for themselves.
I think it's terrible and it's disgusting what they've done. They've just got over to public opinion what they wanted to get over. And I mean, it's obvious that they're on Thatcher's side. Everything that they've reported. They've told lies. They've said there's 200 pickets on a picket line with 200 police, where there isn't. There's 800 police and 200 pickets. And they've just told lies all the way through. The cameras don't want to show and will not film what actually goes on a picket line. They show you 2 seconds of what happens on a picket line, but they do not show you how it starts, how the police go in first.
I've never watched or read anything as biased in my life.
I agree.
It's made us realise now that other groups who we've sat at home and watched on television, read in paper, Greenham Common, all them sort of people, you've sat and watched it, and now we know, I think anyway, that 90% of it is lies, because all what they put on for us in the last 12 months, well 15 months, 90% of that was lies. So Same as I say, you sit here and you watch it through, and you have to go through something like we've gone through to realise how biased and, well, it's all lies. I don't believe anything now until somebody can really and truly prove it for me, to me.
This dispute is unique in many ways, but I think the main one is the fact that for the first time, trade unionists are no longer arguing for higher wages or better conditions, something which they've traditionally done. On this occasion, mine workers are saying that no longer are they prepared to accept that an employer, whether it be private or public, shall have the right to destroy our jobs, our communities and our way of life. And we're challenging the very heart, the very centre of the system under which we live, because we're not accepting any longer that they have the right to butcher our industry. And it's that distinguishes this dispute from any other that's ever taken place in British Labour history. Not only that, of course, but it's brought out in real terms the class conflict between the ruling class, the capitalist class, and the working class, because the capitalist class understand as well that we are literally challenging the very heart of their system by not accepting that they shall have some God-given right to destroy our very lives.
Well, actually, there were about 1,200 men worked here in 1983. And then they got transferred all over the coalfields to Fife, Lothians, and all over. And it'd actually make you sick when you come in that gate, and it's only been over a year ago, and see what's really happened to take her down colliery.
I was brought up in a mining community. I realised that the mine is the heart of this village and the heart of any community. It's the only cash flow that comes into that community. So if that stopped, that's like stopping the heartbeat of a body, and the blood supplies to all the veins just run out, and there's nothing left for people.
If the close Peters pit for this village alone, it'll be a complete finish for here. There'll be nothing for the youth. If today the industry that is around Blythe, they'll all close, because every industry in Blythe depends on Bates Pit.
I think now all we've got left is a couple of shipyards which is due to close. They've been reprieved for about 2 years, but that's only a reprievement. They'll go. Within 2 years they'll go. So all really you have left is the pit itself. Now once they start cutting back there, there's going to be mass unemployment in Southwick. You know, it's not just going to be 28, 29%. You're going to end up with 50%, maybe more.
People of Easington felt that the services needed keeping. We have to keep some. I mean, you can't just have a village with nothing. It'll just be a ghost town. If the pit goes, there'll be nothing. Nothing at all. There'll be no jobs or anything. Under this Thatcher government, there'll be nothing.
We came out to them, everybody says it was for Cottonwood. It weren't. It was just that Cottonwood were the first one that were mentioned in Yorkshire Coalfield. We stayed out 12 months for Cottonwood, as we say. Now, we're only a mile away from Cottonwood, and the first on the new closure list is Darfield Main. Above all other closures as well, they've now announced they're going to close Cottonwood again. So in a mile and a half, they closed Darfield, they closed Cottonwood. That is 1, 2, maybe 3 communities devastated, because there's nothing else. There's only pits.
When I got married, my future was planned. I'd got a husband that was settled in a job, I'd got a roof over my head. I could plan a family. I sometimes wonder, I've got a daughter and son. They've got no future. What can they plan? You know, what have they got to plan it? Nothing. Other than, you know, get up and fight now, and probably they will have something to look forward to. But the way things are running, and if there's as many ignorant people around as there was when I was ignorant before the strike, then these kids don't stand a cat and owl's chance of having any future of any sort.
Get down and climb up, eh? Climb up then. Put your legs up. That's it.
I didn't fight the job myself. I fought it for the young people
in order that they could have security. I could, if I finish next week, accept the 30 pieces of silver, which is what they can give in, but in doing so you sell the job. And what happens then is that in any job, when I started 36 years ago in the coal mines, and on the day that I started I signed on the dotted line sort of thing. I didn't buy the job, and therefore I've got no right 36 years later to sell that job, because it isn't mine to sell.
Our children are leaving school with no future at all. They're just leaving school knowing that they're either on the dole or they join a YTS scheme, which means that the day they start they know the day they finish, which is demoralising. So we've got to go on fighting.
I've been on the youth scheme just for a couple of months when I was waiting to go in the pit, and all you get is all the rubbish jobs. You're putting someone else out of work, because I know for a fact if I was a boss and I could get someone for nothing, which the government paid for, I would take on them people.
There's that many people unemployed, they're going to jump at jobs that under the rates they should be paid, you know. That's what it's all about. Smash the trade unions, got nobody to fight for anybody, have a very weak working class, that's all it's all about. Just weaken the working class so that they've got no power at all. So the people with money and power, they've got it all.
The fight's still going on for the jobs now against the pit closures, and there's other workers coming into the fight as well. Is there anything you want to say to, any message for them?
It's about time everybody start to fight, and they'll all end up in there. So they'll all be fighting for the jobs and end up the same way as us.
Well, they're starting to fight back against it because the miners' strikes woke them up to the realisation that there's no jobs here for them, and they're starting to fight back. Like in this era, more of the young people are starting to come into it, like even though it was towards the end of it, but they are starting to wake up, and in the schools they're realising that there is no jobs in this area for young people anymore. And people here, if the pit closes, like, I mean, where are they going to go for jobs? And the sunrise industries don't take people in that are older than 18 and a half, so they've got nowhere to go, and the schools are getting bigger and bigger, but they're cutting folk back. They've got nothing else to do but have the dole or YTS schemes. So I've got to keep on the fight to fight for people's jobs in this area.
They may not realise it, but they're taking it in and learning in the way that we learned, the way that we became political without realising it at the start. And they're the future. I think they're going to be far more militant than us.
The leadership of the TUC has acted in a pathetic manner. They had a conference where they pledged their support for the miners in their struggle, and all it's been has been lip service.
They should have called all the unions out. It isn't a ladder of fame being a part of a trade union. It isn't a ladder of fame sitting in the TUC office like your officials that I've done up there. It's the fact that you're there to fight for people like us, and they should have done an awful lot more for us, because it's people like us that have put them there and given them the power, and they should have used that power.
As far as the local leadership in Pontypridd, the South Wales anyway, it's not every one of them, but the majority, which I personally feel, that I feel they sold the Welsh coalfield down, that they weren't speaking for the rank and file members. They would have stayed out, and I think the few weeks would have turned the dispute around.
Well, I'm holding in my hand at the moment a blacklist of wagons which have crossed our picket lines, not only in South Wales, but throughout the length and breadth of the British coalfield. And what have actually happened, now that our dispute has come to an end, that our South Wales executive are trying to tell us that a blacklist is non-existent.
Through the strike, they've done certain things, even with the women's groups, where they've stood and said, oh, we want the women with us, the women are here. But when it came down to, it was way into the strike before we were actually accepted by the South Wales NUM, although Arthur Scargill had said, these women must be with us. They said it on platforms, but when it came down to actually doing anything about it, South Wales were very slow.
The Communist Party, throughout this dispute, have tried and succeeded in helping these scab wagon drivers cross our picket lines. We've had the particular union cards taken off them, and in Scotland alone, you can, the Communist Party there have gone down to particular transport and general offices and picked up union cards and reissued them, not on a yearly basis, but on 5 yearly bases. And as we were saying, we rank and file members still say this strike is not finished, and these scabs who have crossed our picket lines will not be allowed on our collieries.
The Labour Party is supposed to represent the working class people, and as far as the miners are concerned, they haven't really done all they could do to support and part of the working class. So that's why we feel that Neil Kinnock shouldn't be invited to our gala this year.
I wouldn't ask Neil Kinnock to come to the rally either. To me, he's a traitor to working class. He's only out for himself, in my opinion. He wants number 10, and if it's up to me, he won't get it.
He didn't distinguish between the picket violence and the police violence. He just seemed to put the onus on the picket violence, on the miners. He never came out and condemned the police outright for their violence.
A lot of people think we've been defeated, but the way things are looking now, she's just going to pick them off one at a time. If everybody had supported everybody else right at the beginning, we wouldn't have been struggling for so long, and we would have shown her. But the way things were, nobody else supported her. I mean, we did get financial support, but that wasn't, we needed that support, we wanted that bodily support. So we've got to keep on fighting for when another strike comes up, or just for to kick her out.
Well, we've got to review our tactics, get our troops together again, because undoubtedly McGregor's going to come with a bigger attack on the coalfield, and knots included, and therefore we've got to look at the position, and the fight goes on from here on.
I don't believe that the miners were defeated, because the miners were the first group of workers to stand and fight. They were in a just cause, and we had everything thrown at the mining communities. In fact, Thatcher just wrote a blank cheque. I mean, when you see the police violence with the HSS regulations, which tried to starve men back to work, we had everything thrown at us, but we stood and fought. And one of the positive aspects of the strike is the women's support groups, particularly, because now we've got fighters in the working class that we didn't have before, particularly amongst the women.
We started off by just having the kids in the kitchen, feeding the kids. And the mum could cope with that, and we got more money and went out collecting and that. We asked the pickets to come down and the adults, and it just accumulated, didn't it? Everybody started using, well, everybody had to start using the kitchen. A few months into the strike, there were no two ways about it.
No. There was a meal for every striking miner and his family every day, Monday to Friday for the 12 months.
I've just recently come back from Holland now, and the support out there is marvellous. I mean, they have told us that they're quite willing to carry on collecting and supporting us for as long as it takes. And, well, just before Christmas, I mean, the people that I had from different countries that came to the house to see me, you know, well, it was like a League of Nations. I had Mexicans, French people, Dutch people. I think one came from Sri Lanka. You know, they came from all over the world. American women miners, we've had 3 of them at home.
We went out the first week with very limited funds and bought enough food to fill 700 food parcels. The second week, word went around and we had helpers, we had many come in, and we filled 1,500 food parcels. And from there it jumped to 5,500, which we have done ever since the 6th week of the strike.
We'll never give up fighting for the honesty of these men. The women have found that they're not ineffective, and we will campaign and we'll have rallies and we'll draw attention to the fact that these men have been unjustly sacked from their jobs merely for having the audacity to fight for their jobs, and we'll just have to keep repeating it and saying it over and over again.
What we're actually doing is helping to support the miners who have been jailed and who have been sacked. In the Lancashire area we only have one. What we think the trade union movement should do in general and a whole is call a general strike, and that will get everybody, because it's no use just keep asking will these men be reinstated, because the coal board are just saying no, because Thatcher is at the back of it and saying no. So we say the trade union should all come out together. It's their jobs, not just the miners' jobs, and they should all come out and stick together and call a general strike and get this Thatcher government out.
We have to continue because their husbands have been sacked. There's so many men been sacked. And not only that, I mean, I think Margaret Thatcher's she's trying to destroy the whole trade union movement, and we as a miners' women support group will have to continue. The struggle for the trade union, and maybe be able to help other women's groups in the future, how to get organised and how to start up. And we'll have to keep going for that reason.
It was something that the miners' strike brought forward the fighting spirit in the women, and again that will go not only for saving pits but saving jobs throughout industry and councils and the health cuts. And in one way that the strike had done a good thing. It's brought people into thinking about the way they live.
The miners have made a stand against the government. It's now up to the rest of the country to give total backing to what the miners have started. In no way is she going to stop with the miners. She's took our union on. She will now go right across the board with the rest of the unions. She's already made a start with the cutbacks on the docks.
Well, one of the main points that struck me about Newsline, ever since the miners' strike started, they've come out with one fact, and it's borne the truth all the way through, and it's been a fact all the way through, and that was that the miners could never win on their own. There should have been a general strike, and as everybody knows, and now the strike is over, that's a fact. But Newsline has brought this out from day one.
It's obvious now, if they can do this with the NUM, and they can get away with it with the NUM, then I think it's imperative for the whole labour and trade union movement, albeit that it may be late in the day, but we now have to organise, and organise to an event which is quite simple. We've got to go for the general strike. We must. It's the only answer to the present government. It's the only way we can get rid of her, and it has to happen.
If the last 12 months has taught us anything, it's taught us how to fight, and that's all we've got. We know how to fight. We've got to fight for these men, and we're going to have to fight even if the Labour government gets in next time. We're still going to have to fight. But other than that, we've got to keep publicity going. We've not got to just sit back and write a letter to them and send a food parcel and make a donation about once every few weeks to the families. That's not enough. They need publicity. They need We the Women on marches. They need as much publicity as they can get to ensure that their men should be freed. They're in prison for one reason and one reason only, because they stood up and they fought for the right to work. And it's up to us, we the women, to ensure, not now, not next week, next year, maybe the year after, never to let the people of Great Britain forget about these men, and that's our duty, and we've got to ensure that the wives and the children are fed, and them men have to be freed. That's our main fight. And not only the men in prison, the men that's been sacked, it's up to us, we the women. We fought for our men. Their men are no different to ours, except they're paying a higher price than our men had to. They've had to go to damn jail for something they believed in.